Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Zen and the Art of Employee Incentives, Unlock the Right Employee Balance, sponsored by Blackhawk Engagement Solutions and presented by Cheryl Nuttall. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for IHR certification credits, 1 HRCI webcast certification credit, and 1 HRCI e-learning credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast to receive your credits. You will receive an email from HR.com within 1 to 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. Questions may be submitted anytime during the webcast by typing the question in the Ask a Question text field and clicking Submit, the orange button located on your screen. And I will now turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Kathy, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. As Kathy mentioned, Zen and the Art of Employee Incentives and finding that balance with incentives is going to be the discussion topic for today. But before we begin, just wanted to take a few moments and just give you a little bit of a background information on our organization. As Kathy mentioned, the Blackhawk Engagement Solutions is a single source provider of tailored employee incentive solutions for companies who are eager to grow their business through engagements. I'm here today really to share with you the results of our survey, and what's interesting about our survey is we really looked at the yin and yang of employee incentives, what works, what doesn't, and why. And before we begin in the meat of the survey results, I'd like to start out with a poll question. And we'd like to know, for the audience group, what is the greatest challenge that you face associated with the multi-generational workforce that you have in play today. So what gives you your greatest challenges across the multiple generations that you are working with in your environment and your organization? We have our answers of managing the talent, leadership development, attaining quality talent, managing change and cultural transformation, or managing the employee work-life balance. So as we are talking, if you could please answer that poll, that will help us in our discussions and part of the discovery later on in our conversation. We all know that corporate incentive programs are really nothing new, but they've increased in popularity in the past decade as companies recognize their value in boosting business performance, employee satisfaction, and tenure. Typically, corporate incentive research has been done from the perspective of HR and managers or executives of a company, but we decided in our survey, Zen and the Art of Employee Incentives, that we really wanted to focus on the employee's perspective. How do they generally feel about incentive programs? Do incentives really increase job satisfaction, retention, and company reputation? What types of incentives do employees prefer? And which of these incentives impact job satisfaction and or work performance? And finally, do the insights gained from our research differ from the two segments tested? And those segments being employees who do have corporate incentives with their employer and employees who do not. Our goal with our research was to confirm the value of incentive programs and help employers design or improve the effectiveness of their existing programs for the best results. And we all know that in today's environment, incentive programs are not just table stakes. They're really a key differentiator, and if done correctly, a very direct competitive advantage. So I think our poll question has ended or is going to end, and Cindy, do we have the results from our poll?
Yes, they are online now.
Mm-hmm. I don't see them. Show the answers. Hold on. Okay, so looking at our poll results, out of the 126 folks that are on there currently, of the top 5 challenges facing, the #1 challenge right now, 26% of you said managing change and cultural transformation, 24% of you said attaining quality talent, 18% of you said leadership development, 17% managing talent, and finally 16% managing work-life balance. This is really indicative of what we're seeing out in the industry across many different verticals, many different organizational types, and many organizations that are facing multiple generations in their employee base. The number 1, 2, 3 in our poll is consistent with the top 3 of the questions polled across many organizations are the same. Managing change and cultural transformation, attaining the talent, and developing leadership. So as we start going through our conversation today and really looking at it from the employee's perspective, we'll start looking at some of those challenges, and then in further research that our organization is sponsoring, we're going to be developing even more that particularly pertain to the types of challenges facing each one of you right now. So thank you for answering that poll question. Let's go ahead and start. All right, so let's talk about the attitude about corporate incentives. Remember, this is from the employee's perspective. This is across the entire base that was surveyed. So, clearly, 81% love corporate incentives or like corporate incentives. They feel that they're more satisfied with their job. They motivate them to be more productive, and they feel more value in the organization. In particular, these stats really are not anything new, right? But I want you to take a look at the upper right-hand corner. Being given or nominated for a corporate incentive would make me feel more accomplished, right? So 80% of the folks really feel more accomplished if they had the ability to give and or nominate an incentive to their peers. So that might be a situation where you may want to have peer-to-peer recognition, maybe monetary or non-monetary recognition for each of them to be able to recognize each other. And then, we also looked at the 4 or 5 employees that have satisfaction in giving a coworker reward, starting to find very real opportunities for them to engage their peers, recognize their peers, and maybe broadcast that recognition across the organization so they can create kind of that sense of community in the workplace. Okay. If we look at the next slide, impact of incentives on job performance, right? So the question was asked, what is the likelihood that these rewards would impact your motivation to perform better at your job? 71% responded that likely or somewhat likely. And if we look at that, corporate incentives means that 4 out of 5 employees find that incentive programs increase job satisfaction and performance. Again, not really anything new, just substantiates prior knowledge, prior survey results, prior information across the industry, and really is just a testament to the effectiveness of incentive programs in general. Okay. We all know that employee incentives are important. We all know from statistics in the past and current that it drives engagement, improves productivity, and improves profitability. But we also like to look at least from our organization's perspective, not only our own studies, but studies from other organizations that are really monitoring and measuring employee satisfaction, employee rates inside an organization, employer effectiveness with their programs. And Gallup does a lot of these different types of studies, and really most recently Gallup has discovered links between employee engagement at the business unit level and vital performance indicators including customer metrics, higher profitability and productivity, fewer defects, lower turnover, loss absenteeism, fewer safety incidents, all of those key performance indicators that organizations are monitoring. And when a company raises employee engagement levels consistently across every business unit, everything gets better. And according to Gallup, when companies can increase their number of talented managers and double the rate of engaged employees, they achieve on average 147% higher earnings per share than their competition. So when we talk about incentive programs designed and managed appropriately, and we think of them as a key competitive advantage and driving the organization forward, the way we design, the way we look at employee attitudes and preferences, the way we manage the cultural differences inside our organization have a direct correlation to increased earnings per share and increased profitability inside an organization. If we look at what's important, right? Preferences are individual. Everyone has their own ideas and attitudes, but the balance between the type of incentive and how it's delivered will determine the optimal results, right? So in our study, we found from the employee's perspective, 85% preferred individual incentives versus group incentives. And that's not really surprising to us, given that each person inside an organization is pursuing their own individual career path that aligns with the larger corporate mission and goals, but because it's individual and their career path is individual, they really prefer incentives that are based on their individual contributions versus group recognition, right? So your focus, given that, should be on improving the employee experience, including identifying and developing people with diverse ideas, opinions, insights, and innovations related to what they do most of their waking hours, which is work at your particular organization. All right? So you may want to develop some profile surveys or recognition preference surveys directed to the employee base that showcases preferences and attitudes, and then make that information available to managers, especially in decentralized organizations, so that they can better understand the individual motivators of their employees, right, their employee base. And I might even take that as a second step, that if in decentralized organizations, if you have managers with direct employees that they're not interacting personally on a day-to-day basis, they're not located in the same location, that it even becomes more important for us to provide some helpful aids to them so they can get to know each of their employees as individuals and understand their recognition preferences, their engagement attitudes, and how they interact with each other and directly with you as their direct manager. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about good versus bad recognition. We found this was very interesting, that those things that were their top reasons for satisfaction with the program were also the top reasons for dissatisfaction. So if you look at, what we asked the employees of why they were either satisfied or dissatisfied, clearly reward value, reward choices was at the top, right? So the yin-yang duality of these responses reveals that it's important to align the perceived value of the award to the work it recognizes and communicate it with a personal outreach, right? So sometimes we use technology, especially today, where the incentive management technology that has really enabled us to manage very decentralized programs in a very efficient way has also sometimes become the replacement for personal interaction. And one of the attitudes that came out from the employees not only is that individual recognition, but it's also the personal touch, right? So remembering whoever is doing the recognizing to personally communicate that recognition back to the individual, reinforce the company goals, tell them exactly what was done, why they're being recognized, how it impacted the organization, and don't ever forget, of course, to say thank you, but align it with the corporate goals and objectives in a very personal way, right? So remember that the incentive management technology should be an enabler, not replace your personal interaction. Number two is to really offer a wide array of rewards that appeal to different types of employees, especially in multiple generations within the workplace, right? In order to do that, it's necessary for you to understand key differences in experiences, preferences, and beliefs among the generations working in your organization, and then to apply the right kind of recognition practice and reward offering based on that information, right? You may want to survey with very specific questions about how they feel about the current program, the rewards that are being offered. Does it meet their needs? Is it something that they aspire to work for? That sort of thing. And number three, we found that employees really value fairness, simplicity, and a variety of options, right? Fairness and equity seem to have come up in our survey over and over again, and it seems to be a troublesome area across organizations. So if you are in a decentralized organization and there is a fairness or an inconsistency in how managers are recognizing their employees, you may want to think about doing some additional manager aids, such as a nomination wizard with maybe a series of questions that talk about what was the effort, what was the impact, what did it take to accomplish, and was there thought leadership involved, was it outside of their normal course of business, those types of things, and use a weighting and scaling system so that managers can look at that, assess what the recognition was, and then have some guidance in terms of how that individual should be recognized, right? So the key is fairness and equity, and then in addition, simplicity. Employees need to know really what goals and objectives they are moving towards. If we have corporate goals and values that are aligned at the corporate level, how does that then feed down to the lower ranks, to my individual activities of what I do every single day, and how I do that job, how it impacts the overall corporate goals, and how I help in my individual job in moving that organization forward. Forward. And that's really what seems to be very important, right? Understanding from a recognition preference point of view, the type of recognition, whether it's a formal announcement in front of a town hall or their group of peers versus just the one-on-one individual preference, and that's key. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the emotional tie to good recognition, right? In the past, people got their greatest sense of happiness from time spent with families or hobbies, right? Today, we find that job satisfaction factors into their overall happiness with life. This really is a monumental shift in that job fulfillment is really essential. And when we talk about that work-life balance and we talk about that crossover effect, we've all had that really, really great day that crosses over to everyone that we meet, going home to family or friends, and just our general attitude. And then we've all experienced that really bad day or that really frustrating day, and we're not as lively going home. We're not as lively talking to other individuals. We might be even a little bit grumpy. And so it really does cross over our experiences of work into our work and family life. And the same is true. Bad times at home, sometimes we're not as lively or as productive as we have at work. And what we find is that engagement is really determined in a worker's heart, not in their mind, right? So if we look at the tie of the emotions to good recognition, right, we have to understand that everybody is unique. Everybody has their own triggers and the responses. And again, getting to know the employees, those direct managers, their direct relationship with those employees, and understand that their emotions and their feelings are tied to all of the activities that they perform every day, and positive, well-designed recognition, personalized recognition is key to then increasing those engagement levels, right? And how we found that how people feel in their jobs has the greatest impact on their performance and centers around really 4 primary categories: communication with their immediate manager and coworkers, the overall company growth and their personal career development, recognition and appreciation by others and to others, so that's that peer-to-peer element, and trust and confidence in the company, their direct manager, and their immediate coworkers. Those 4 areas seem to resonate in the overall engagement levels for individuals. According to University of North Carolina psychology professor Barbara Fredrickson, she stated that when people are made to feel cared for, nurtured, and growing, that will serve the organization well, because those feelings drive commitment and loyalty just like it would in any relationship. If you feel uniquely seen, understood, valued, and appreciated, then that will hook you into being committed to that team, leader, and organization. This is how positive emotions work. And as we start looking at recognition and the emotional tie to recognition and how those emotions then turn into engagement, we can see that correlation. So now, how do we avoid disappointing recognition? Again, we've talked about a number of these things already: fair, equitable, and consistent recognition, tailored communication and the style with which we interact with the employees, and then the third bullet, employee demographic-based award options, especially with 26% of you whose greatest challenge was managing that change and cultural transformation. Really understanding the culture, really understanding the generations and their belief systems from those generations will help you identify with that. And we know that people have strong feelings about how they want to be acknowledged. Some like company-wide announcements, but most we found preferred that more personal human touch. Again, consider a questionnaire to understand from an individual basis what their preference is, and making sure that the immediate managers, people that interact with them all of the time, understand those preferences. Okay? Aligning your recognition program to your employee demographics is essential, right? So programs need to be designed to reflect the company's socio-demographic profile. For example, if you're a manufacturing organization and you have a lot of manufacturing plant personnel that are really focused on food, clothing, shelter, and growing their family or personal lives, maybe some of the higher-end aspirational goals that you may have available in that merchandise catalog or whatever it happens to be may not be appropriate for that segment. So for that segment of population, maybe more flexibility in the reward options to help them with their food, clothing, shelter situation might be more appropriate. Conversely, higher-end individuals that can handle food, clothing, shelter, and all of those basic needs and those types of things, right, may be looking for more aspirational things to be able to use their recognition award for. So in tailoring those incentives and those reward options to the age demographic can increase the effectiveness of your program and the overall satisfaction. All right? As an example from our study, we found that the opportunity to meet with senior business leaders and recognition from managers or peers were consistently ranked as one of the least preferred incentives across the entire employee base surveyed, because we believe these rewards have career development value rather than monetary value. However, if we look at the age group of 21 to 34, which we all know is that prime career advancement age, it is more important than in the other age groups. And that's just a real-life example of really looking at your age demographics and understanding for those age demographics what are most important, right? The other things that we found is that to be effective, you really need to be consistent in how recognition is practiced across the organization, right? How are budgets being utilized? How is the recognition being distributed amongst the employee base? It's very easy for managers to always recognize maybe your top-tier employees. It's always easy to work with employees and help them in their development plans for the lower tiers, but it's really difficult to spread the wealth or spread the recognition in that middle group and to really start focusing on how you move the masses versus what may be easier to do, right? And then additionally, managers really need to be focused on recognizing the right behaviors. So again, manager aids, talking to managers about best practices, what recognition means inside your organization, what the goal is for having the program, and then what they can do in terms of the everyday activities that their employees are doing to help meet those goals, and that's what they should be focusing on in their recognition, right? And then essential again, standardization on your presentation standards and guidelines, your preferences for recognition for employees, and really looking at it as an individual action, an individual communication, an individual positive reinforcement of something that impacted the organization and something that they went above and beyond to accomplish that was outside of their normal everyday activities. Okay, so let's look at demystifying the demographic differences. Okay. We've found that age was not really a major factor in influencing the effectiveness of incentives, right? And because we're living in such a dynamic age and we have many generations represented in the workforce, you know, there's a couple of things. So if we look at the yin-yang of that again, organizations who are heavy with the ages of 50 to 64, those boomers, right? They're in grave danger of losing institutional knowledge if they're not effective in teaching and training the younger generations, right? So the yang now is to really look at it as never have before. We've been in a better time to connect with and create success from so many different viewpoints. And how do we blend those two? And how do we, you know, with so many different generations represented in the workforce, how do we engage with an ever-expanding array of people that all have their different attitudes and emotional triggers, right? So even though across this age grouping that 86% at the top tier, 80+%, makes them feel more satisfied, more productive, and that sort of thing, look at like at the bottom right, incentives motivate me to be more productive. Well, I could look at that and say, well, yes, 83% are more productive from the age group of 21 to 34, but I have a real problem with ages 50 to 64 because it doesn't motivate them to be more productive. And that, again, is where you need to really look at the attitudes and preferences and belief system of the different age groups, because if we look at that 61%, most of them are established in their career. They understand the organization. They understand that the activities that they do every day are aligned with the corporate goals, and they're not as maybe career motivated to really grow, to move up the chain of command, so to speak. But the challenge is that how do you take that ages 50 to 64 and in their belief system, as they're starting to think about retirement plans and other things of that nature, how do we re-engage them, and how do we get them productive, and how do we get them actively engaged in teaching and mentoring and sharing ideas, innovations, techniques, how they approach problems and those types of things with the 21 to 34, right? So those are some of the issues with the multi-generational workforce, but then also the foundational layer for continued studies. Okay. You know, we really looked at, you know, for those millennials, those age 21 to 34 plus or minus a couple of years, and we really looked at, you know, their preferences and things like that, and we thought to ourselves, why would millennials value incentives so much more maybe than some of the other age groups? And we really had to sit back and look at how did they grow up, what's been available to them, you know, and we have a little saying here in our office that we call living out loud, and that's really what they have done. They have grown up in an age of technology where everything is socialized with peers, with families, with friends, with different groups, and they really live out loud. And if you look at how they were raised, for the majority of them, very much in a positive recognition state, right, myself included, raising my own children. And so they have grown with that continual positive reinforcement. And we found that they really received some real strong emotional satisfaction from that consistent accolade, those attaboys from peers, that sharing of things that are important to them, that really is very, very important and really drives them and increases their engagement levels. And that's a little bit different than some of the other age groups, right? And so that's a key differentiator in terms of just how they, what their outlook is and their belief system, and how they interact with each other. Right. Let's look at, you know, the digital world, right? So in years past, we saw folks that would say, yeah, you know, the baby boomers or the older group, they really didn't embrace technology and they're not as up to speed as maybe the younger group with the millennials. And what we've really seen is that group that kind of collapse on each other, right? So they've kind of overlapped now. And although if you have an older demographic employee base, they may not be early adopters of technology, but they're proficient, right? Whereas the millennials may be early adopters. They like the new gadgets. They like the the iWatch that's coming out. They like the new version of the iPhone, whatever it happens to be. A lot of them are early adopters. But if you really look a little bit deeper into their perspectives, the younger group has been raised and are really technology dependent. Everything they do has a technology element to it. If they want to find out something, they go to Google. If they want to get different perspectives, they get on Facebook. They do all of these different, if they want to, broadcast something, they get on Twitter, Snapchat, whatever it happens to be, right? But you look at the other age groups, and you start looking at, they didn't have all of those technology advances, so they really look at more communicating with each other to share ideas and to problem resolve. They look at their own internal problem resolution skills, their analytical skills, and those types of things, and how do you bridge that together? Different perspectives. So when we looked at, well, now let's use digital inside of incentive programs, what would that look like across all of those different age groups? And it's spot on. It's within plus or minus just a few points. And they thought virtual rewards were just as easy to use as maybe other non-virtual rewards, right? And according to Mercator, they really are studying usage of virtual rewards across the entire consumer base, which employees are consumers. And they really looked at the attitudes and the preferences for the virtual rewards. And they said there's two things that they said that were important in their 2014 report. One is that mobile is rising rapidly, and 40% of the consumers bought virtual cards, up from 28% in 2013. And more than half of the virtual card buyers report that their virtual cards were delivered by text message or by a mobile app, as well as a confirmation email. So this kind of tells you that, it's getting to be more and more common for folks to use digital technology, both from the reward perspective as well as the actual incentive platform connection. If we look at the access point of view, right, do they prefer going to a website, using an app, a mobile app, those types of things. And you can see the preferences from, the appeal of corporate incentives via a mobile app from 78% for the age group in the younger age grouping to 46% of the older age grouping. Again, that's just early adopters and what they grew up and what they're most comfortable with. And again, you may want to think about your demographics in your organization, and you may want to think about the type of access that they are more likely to adopt, and maybe invest in what applications, whether that is mobile, whether that's a website, whether it's a different access point that might be more manual in terms of promotion cards that are given to offline individuals, those types of things. Really look at your demographics, and before you spend your money on your latest and greatest, consider how people will interact with it, right? So if you really understand the demographics and the adoption of technology, you can really spend your budget dollars wisely and get the most effectiveness in terms of interaction with your incentive program. We looked at mobile app use by industry. Again, this is from the employee perspective, and it's not surprising that IT would lead the group in terms of IT professionals being more comfortable with mobile applications and the use of their smartphone to conduct recognition activities or any other activities. If you look at, construction, engineering, manufacturing, many of those people are very mobile, as well as sales and marketing, right? But it was interesting to find that in HR, finance, and accounting, that they're right up there just below IT in terms of mobile app use, and that was interesting to me as an individual. And so, depending on what industry your organization is in, the age demographics of your employees, you may want to think, if you haven't already, you may want to think about expanding the access points with your incentive program to include mobile apps or even mobile web, if you just want to have it optimized for the smartphone. Clearly, in today's day and age, iPads and tablets and laptops should be a given, right? They should be treated the same as your desktops. But maybe depending on industry and demographics, you may want to look at a mobile app or mobile web device as well. All right. So, 17% of you said managing talent and attaining quality talent. 24% attaining quality talent were challenges that you're facing today. So again, from the employee perspective, are they effective in retaining talent and acquiring new talent, especially among the younger workforce? So if you look at, some of the questions that were asked and some of the answers, I wish I were offered more corporate incentives, or in searching for a job, an incentive program in place would affect my decision. That was interesting to us in terms of some of the percentage points that we saw, right? So in the age groupings of 21 to 34 and 35 to 49, which most transitory groups that are there, they're clearly a key factor in the acquisition and the retention areas. It's a key decision point, right? More and more in these age groups, employee incentives are perceived as a necessary portion of the compensation, the overall compensation package. Right? Price Waterhouse said 81% of CEOs said they were concentrating their investment focus on talent, and 90% of the CEOs surveyed said they're changing their strategies for attracting and retaining talent. So if you don't currently have an incentive program, or if you feel like your incentive program maybe is not as effective, then one of the things that you may want to do is ask yourself the question, am I competitive in the marketplace? And maybe understanding in your own employee base how they would respond to each one of those questions. And then also maybe if you really look at, the 44% that are in the older age group and the 69% of the younger in searching for a job, think about who's really searching for a job at the older group versus the younger group, and the masses that are searching for those jobs, and what you can do inside your incentive program to make it more effective across the generations and age groupings, and to make it seem like it is a competitive advantage. I shouldn't say make it seem like, make it a competitive advantage, and make it a part of the overall benefit package that will attract and retain employees. Okay. All right, so let's look at finding balance. All right. There's a few areas that we should look at, but first, before they do that, I'd like to do a show of hands. So if everyone who could give me a show of hands, if you believe you understand what engagement means and how to determine its impact on your organization. So by a show of hands, if you believe you understand what true engagement means and how to measure or determine its impact on your organization, just give me a show of hands, and we'll look at that in just a bit. Okay? So when we look at, finding the balance between the workforce generations, the digital adoption, the reward value to the work, aligning with your objectives, and then communicating, right, that personal touch, and streamlining the process so that you're focusing on the program dynamics itself, the interaction with the employees itself versus the day-to-day management or activities associated with managing the incentive program. You really need to find that balance of doing that. And we're a part of the Incentive Research Foundation, and Melissa Van Dyke, who is their current CEO, has some recommendations in terms of the key fundamentals, right? So the first is to know what the business purpose is behind your program. What are you trying to drive? Is it customer advocacy, better training, better innovation, better sharing of knowledge? What is the key purpose behind your program, right? And that's beyond retaining and attracting employees, but really the true purpose of the program. And number two, make sure that the reward and recognition that is given is meaningful to the individuals who are receiving it. And that when we give recognition, that we tie it back to the business performance and tell those individuals what they've done to earn the award and how it has helped us grow as a business, right? And that's in addition to just don't ever forget the thank you. And then finally, make sure we are tracking and monitoring the programs over time, and then use that information to make our programs better, right? So measurement against goals is critical to success. And some of the key, performance indicators, some of the key measurement criteria that you may want to put in place in terms of understanding whether your program is effective or not is, there's an initial one. Will I refer my friend or family member to work at the organization, right? What are my current attrition rates, and are those attrition rates standard across the industry that I'm in? Do I fall within what's normal, or am I outside of normal, right? When you're attracting new talent, are you really attracting that top-tier talent echelon that you're looking for, or do you find that maybe there are some gaps in the benefit package or the culture as an organization or the type of interaction people have with their direct managers, especially as they learn during the interview process? We all know it's a two-way interview process, and they learn about how people communicate with each other, what we can do to increase that. Do we have an absenteeism problem or a safety record problem? And finally, what is our percentage of employees that are being promoted from within versus going to the outside to bring in new talent? Those are some of the key fundamentals that we may want to chat about and look at your measurement criteria and see whether or not your program is effective as it possibly can be. All right? So do we have our show of hands answers, Cindy?
Yes, only about 20% indicated that they were comfortable with understanding what engagement means and how to determine its impact.
Okay, and that's not really out of line with what we have found ourselves in talking to lots of different HR professionals across the various organizations that we work with. And a lot of people will talk about, well, we recognize our employees, we spend X amount of dollars doing that every year, we're aligning it with our core values, we're making sure that our managers are personally recognizing each other, but we're not sure if it's really impactful, if it's making a difference to our bottom line, and we're not really sure whether what engagement really means, right? How do I know an employee is really engaged so that I'm getting the most out of their day, the most productivity that I can, but more than that, are they looking for ways to move the organization forward? Are they doing everything in their power and actively engaged in helping others along that same journey, sharing knowledge and information, producing the very best results they can? How do I know? We asked those questions as well, and we thought, well, it is worthy of doing yet another study for us to really talk about what makes someone engaged. And if we combine engagement and we tie that to the emotions, and we tie that to the crossover effect of carrying those emotions to or from home to work, right? And the individual's need. I mean, we're all people, we're all humans. We all know that we seek happiness, right? From the time we actually are born to the day we die, we're constantly seeking happiness in one form or another. So we're going to create this study. We're in the process of doing it now, that ties all of those things together. What does it mean to be happy? How does that cross over to your life? What does it mean to be engaged? And start looking at that. And so look forward to that in upcoming webinars, those results from those studies, and looking at it from that perspective. All right. So that's really the end of the information that we had available to present from our study. And I'd like to open it up now to any questions that people might have. We've got a few minutes on our timeline. And so if you have any questions, we'll take them now. Cindy will be monitoring those questions. I'd like to hear from you.
Cheryl, the first question came from Terry, and her question is, she currently does not have a rewards or incentive program. So where should she start in developing that? Will a survey be a good point, or do you have any best practices that you can share?
So one of the things that we truly believe that a well-designed incentive program, especially as you are starting on the journey, right, is to take a realistic view of where you're at today. And we like to think of it as an evolution, right? So some organizations will have managers that will run out to the grocery store, pick up a gift card, and just do ad hoc recognition. If you are doing ad hoc recognition right now, one of the things that I may suggest that you put in place is just more of the social element. We call it Be Social. That's peer-to-peer thank yous. That is, a formalized manager spot awards. That is really talking about broadcasting the award. Maybe we call it a wall of fame, but an area where people can share, similar to Facebook. They can share everyone's accolades, and then they can expand upon them with sharing their own comments. That's probably where I would start. While I'm doing that, I would be working with my executive management team and really talk about what does engagement and recognition look like inside the organization? What's the goals of what we want to achieve? What are the areas where we think we want to have impact? And after you get that basis or that foundational layer, then you really need to do a survey with the employees and really talk about what motivates me. What are my preferences? What are my worries inside the organization? What does my relationship look like with my coworkers and my peers and my direct manager? So if we go back to those key drivers that we talked about early in our conversation of what's important to employees, those 4 key factors that are really important to employees, that's really what you want to drill down on and gain information. Putting in a peer-to-peer thank you will start that, but you really want to gather and gain information before you go out with a formalized incentive program, right? Next question.
I'm going to paraphrase this, but there are several questions that are coming up that appear to be the same. So basically the question is, what types of incentives appear to work best for most employers? Are there other ways, for example, rewards around money or days off, or so what works best?
Right. So it's a blend. I believe wholeheartedly in monetary and non-monetary awards so that we can speak to all audiences, so people that are really working in their career growth, FaceTime with leaders, Jeans Day if you have a formal dress policy, parking spaces if you have, difficult parking and you've got cherished parking spaces. If you're in a consulting type of organization where people are working a lot of hours, you may want to have days off, things like that. And then in terms of monetary reward vehicles, flexibility is key, especially across diverse multi-generations. Flexibility is key. So they need to be able to take that reward and be able to use it based on their own personal preferences and based on what stage they are in life, right? So think about those types of reward vehicles. We all know, or well, at least we know in our industry, the reason why prepaid cards or gift cards are so popular is because they're so flexible, right? We don't necessarily like to promote true cash vehicles because you lose that aspirational aspect of it. However, there are some awards that are more appropriate, especially bonuses and that types of thing, where it needs to be processed through payroll. So don't be afraid of that, right? But just don't make that your whole vehicle. You want the blend of the aspirational as well as the non-monetary, more personal preference, skill setting. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in one of the organizations we work with is that they give people the opportunity to take training or go to other classes or even to conferences and trade shows for people that's not really a part of their job today, but their own personal career growth that helps them along that journey. So they get recognition and have the ability to use that to now go to a conference or a trade show they haven't been able to attend before. So really, again, think about your demographics. Think about those preferences. Think about where they're at in their career path and what's most important. And flexibility is key across all organizations, flexibility. Okay. Do we have another question, Cindy?
Yes, so in terms of trying to match the magnitude of the employee's performance, how do we match that with an applicable reward in terms of value?
Okay. So we offer to many of our clients, we call it a nomination wizard, and I spoke about that a little bit earlier in our conversation. So fair and consistent recognition with that weighting and scaling period, process that we follow. So there are 4 or 5 key questions that if we present them in front of the managers as part of the recognition process, and we talk about what was the level of effort. Is it, did it take me a day? Did it take me a week? Did it take me many weekends? Was it a 3-month project that I worked heavily on? Was the action a part of my normal everyday doing business? This is what I do for my job, so it really wasn't out of the norm. Or really was it outside of the norm? I really went above and beyond, and I did something that's completely outside of my job, but I saw a need. I jumped in on a project team, or I jumped in to help a coworker. I did whatever it had to do, and I used my knowledge and expertise and skill sets to then help someone else, right? And if I look at the financial impact to the organization, did I create new efficiencies? Did I save money or put in new safety measures or whatever it happens to be? Did I make recommendations to help the organization either reduce accident levels or whatever it may be, or streamline processes? Or did I have a direct financial impact to the organization, either increasing business, retaining a client that maybe was at risk, or those types of things? And you put them on a weighting scale, the least to the greatest. And as managers are recognizing their employees, they're answering these questions, and based on that weighting and scale, you decide as an organization, based on that overall summary of the impact of the organization, what the recommendation would be in terms of that reward. And so as managers, especially in decentralized organizations, start to understand the key drivers of the purpose behind your program and the measurement according to the impact of the organization, you will now become more standard and more consistent in how you're recognizing employees, and in turn, they will then begin to understand in detail, right? They'll be able to understand in detail what their everyday activities do to move that organization forward and what is meaningful to the organization. Okay.
Cindy? So is grading a better option to plan incentive programs?
Is grading a better option, meaning grading like the grade level that I am as an employee, or grading or measuring the impact to the organization? I guess I don't understand that question. If we could ask it a different way.
Let's just speak to both so that everyone is clear. So
okay.
It could mean, go ahead.
Okay, so I really am a proponent of really having a peer-to-peer element, regardless of what your level is in the organization, a peer-to-peer element of a thank you. And depending on the grade level you are in the employee base, that you may have a monetary budget that you can use to recognize employees. I feel strongly that the executive team and maybe the upper level vice president, director level employees, although that they should participate in the recognition, they should be the ones issuing the recognition, that their other MBOs or their bonus plans or whatever it happens to be really address that. So you're really looking at those employees' day-to-day activities that you really need to motivate so that they can help move the organization. And if you do that by band level or by grade level or whatever it happens to be, you're really looking at that employee base in terms of who you are focusing the recognition activities on. Right? So you're looking at middle management on down and maybe a frontline director level or initial level director level, right? And then as you're looking at grading or scorecards, if you will, what is really critically important is that consistency across organizations. And so measuring budget utilization and the spread of recognition across the employee base, that is critical to understand how that's being used and how that's being adopted by the individuals that are eligible to issue those manager spot awards or other formal awards, those monetary awards, and then the individuals are receiving. So really look and measure those adoption rates and budget utilization. And if you do have a problem with fair and consistency, you must put in a nomination wizard. That will kill engagement levels faster than anything else, is if the same activity, same impact to the organization does not receive the same type of recognition, right? That is critical.
In terms of an individual employee's SMART goals that they may have on an annual basis, how does that tie into an incentive reward program?
It ties in specifically to the incentive program. So if we look at, let's say, aligning strategically with your corporate objectives and your core values, as you're putting the individual goals together, they should align up the chain to those corporate objectives and those core values, but they are tailored to the individual employee's work effort and job and that sort of thing and responsibilities. But when a manager is recognizing their employee and they understand what their individual metrics are and their goals are, and they correlate that with their activities as it relates to the corporate goals and objectives, they should be tying the two together. I should understand my goals and my everyday actions, and then I understand how I magnify my everyday actions to even go beyond what I'm doing today, and it's also following my career path, and that's exactly what managers should be looking at to recognize. And when we talk about making it meaningful, making it specific, making it tailored to the individual, that's what we're talking about. When that manager comes back and says, thank you, John, for doing X, Y, Z, he should be tying it back to their goals, that individual's goals, and then relating it to the core values and the corporate objective, and how that effort not only magnified what the goals were, but helped move that organization forward. They are hand in hand with each other. I think we have time for just one more question, and then we'll have to end our conversation. Cindy, are you there?
Yes. How do flexible work schedules fit into employee incentives? What are the pros and cons, and what type of flexibility is proven to work best?
Okay, so again, look at the dynamics inside your organization. You know, a lot of you said that 16% of you said managing work-life balance was a key challenge inside your organization. So clearly there's an employee base that really needs to have that flexibility. If we remember our overall engagement levels, especially with the younger generations, that work-life balance is key. It's almost a higher level of importance than the job itself, right? If you look at the millennials, they live and then work. Very different from the boomers who work to live. So their belief system is very different. I'm a firm believer in flex time so that you can take care of those things that you need to take care of and then also be productive at work. But you need to find that balance. Not everybody can be as effective outside of the office as inside of the office. But you need to have flex time available for people to take care of those things that are important, still making certain that they complete their work effort. So I may suggest that instead of maybe having flex time mandatory across the entire organization, that maybe division leaders can understand the dynamics of what's going on and institute flex time where appropriate and be able to manage it appropriately. But if you have a flex time workforce, I'm sharing desks, or I'm part of a call center, but I work from home, you know, certain days of the week. You know, I've got, you know, people that are coming in that are working 20 and 25 hours and other people that are working 40 hours. And you're really looking at all of that dynamic. Absolutely across the board, across all of those different types of dynamics, incentives work. Again, it comes back to what's your position, what's your effectiveness, what's your impact on the organization, regardless of I'm a flex employee or I'm a full-time employee, or I need that work-life balance, I need flexibility in my schedule. Incentives cross over all of that. All right, I think we are up on our time. I thank everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to continual conversations as we continue our research and study, and as we look at the increasing changes in culture due to the generations in the workforce and due to the globalization or the globalized nature of the workforce, and maybe even the mobility of the workforce. We're going to be looking at that much deeper and much broader, and we'll be sharing all of those results and those thoughts and ideas and techniques with you in future webinars. And again, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Take care. Kathy, I turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl, for presenting this very informative webcast today. The archive webcast and slides will be available on the HR.com site within 24 hours, located under the archive webcast listing. You will receive an email from HR.com with the certification credit information within 1 to 2 business days. Blackhawk Engagement Solutions and HR.com do appreciate your feedback, so please take a moment at the very end of the webcast to complete the evaluation survey, which will appear on your screen. This concludes our webcast, and thank you again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.